So, welcome to the Deep Dive into Death, Episode 9. I'm your host, Maleah Bajich, and I'm here today with Morrow from Comfort in Death Doula. And you can find Mar here at comfortindeathdoula.ca/WordPress. And our services are support services, advanced care planning, dying and death planning, legacy, and death cafes. And you can contact Mar at Marlene at comfortindeathdoula.ca. And you can find me here at findingrealm.com and on X, YouTube, and Rumble. And I've got a Death Cafe showing up the first Tuesday of every month. So the next one's August 5th at 1:30 to 3 at the Vancouver Island Regional Library in Qualicum Beach. So Mar, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Maleah. I'm excited about this, to have a chat. Always like talking about death.
Yeah, right.
Love it.
So Mar and I have known each other for a couple years now. We've been working beside each other, like becoming death doulas and out in the public. Mar's over in Ottawa, and I'm over here on Vancouver Island. And I guess one of the things that we want is people just to sort of get to know you at the beginning. So, what made you want to become a death doula?
You know what made me start was hearing about advanced care planning. I had no idea what advanced care planning was. Listening to a podcast from a doctor here in Ottawa, and he's a palliative care doctor and an ICU doctor. And he talked about how important advanced care planning is because he said so many times, I'm at the bedside of a patient and there's an issue comes up and I turn to the family to say, what would your mom, dad, sister, whatever want? And he said too many times, I get the response, I don't know, we never talked about it. So he was talking, and so I'm like, okay, that's my bandwagon. Like I'm promoting this. And so I did my advanced care plan and, and then through like at the end of COVID, I thought like all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, there's a lot of lonely people out there. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of lonely people that are dying. People are dying alone. And I just got this like, oh my gosh, urge that I need to help these people dying alone. And then I was working with a senior man. I used to do some work with him, and I would actually wasn't really work. We played crib every 2 weeks, and he was in the long-term care home. Through COVID, he became very ill, and his daughter phoned to see if I would be able to go into the home and be with him as he was dying. So I was with him a few days, and then he was dying. So I said to his family, I don't mind being here with him when he dies. This was way before I knew anything about death doula. And so I was with him when he died. I asked his son what his favorite music was. He said Elvis Presley. So I came home, downloaded a bunch of Elvis Presley music on my phone. And then when the home phoned me to say he was dying, I went in and I was at his bedside with him, and I was FaceTiming with his son in Japan. And I was with him when he died. And I was sad because I knew him quite well, but what overpowered the sadness was a sense of, wow, what an honor. And I just felt so like it was an honor to be able to do that for his family. And it was an honor to just be with him. And so then I thought, okay, like I want to do this more. Then again, another podcast. I love those podcasts. I heard about this end of life doula. And what I had wanted to do with people is I thought I'd like to do some work. I wasn't calling it legacy work because I wasn't familiar with that term, but I was saying I'd like to, if they've got letters they want to write to people, if they want to do a video for their children, and just, talk about the dying, if they're scared, like help them. If they need to talk to their family, help with those conversations. Then I heard somebody talking about being an end-of-life doula, and I'm like, just a minute. What you're describing is your profession, is what I've already decided I want to do. So I thought, well, maybe that's a profession I need to get into. So I took my course with Home Hospice Association, and away I went.
Yeah, nice. So, do you think that that gentleman that you were with had what we could consider like a good death?
You know what? I would say yes, because he was not conscious, um, and but I feel very strongly that we can hear right till the end. And so he was able to hear his son talking to him from Japan. He was able to hear the music. I was there holding his hand and saying, you know what, it's okay. Like, it's okay. I'm here with you. And yeah, and then actually what happened was I said to his son, I think we'll step out into the hall. So I went out into the hall with my laptop, and I said to his son, I think that it's done. And he said, yeah. He said, I've said everything I need to say, and I'm comfortable with, closing down this FaceTime. And I went back into the room, and the nurse said he's gone. So
Wow.
I think he was waiting for us to leave the room, which often, very, very often happens. And he went. And so it was just, yeah, it was very, yeah, like I said, a very honoring.
I've noticed that quite a few times in my own experiences of just giving people the actual permission to,
Hmm.
die or leave or exit, where it's just like, okay, everything is absolutely done that you can do anytime you're ready.
Yeah,
And it often's either happened like an hour later or within that day or that
yeah,
night or yeah, so isn't that
yeah.
kind of interesting,
Well, that's
hey?
what I was with years ago. I work with developmentally disabled adults, and I was with one of the men that I was working with, and he was dying. And I had been with him for about 24 hours. So I said to him, you know what? I'm just going to go home and have a shower, and I'm going to come back. But if you need to go while I'm gone, that's okay. And I left, and I came home. I was gone for about 2 hours, and I walked into the room, and the nurse looked at me, and she's like, he's gone. Like, and it was just, I almost feel like I don't know, and I never will know, but I feel like he heard me coming down the hall and saying hello to, the girls at the nursing station, and he thought, okay, just before she gets in here, I'll go, so yeah, like it's so interesting how that all happens, you know?
So now that you've experienced death, besides just say members in your own family or close friends, but as clients of yours, has it changed your viewpoint on death at all?
Yeah, I would say it has because um, when you think about death and you haven't experienced, you think it's morbid. You think it's like, oh, like I don't want to be there. Like, what will I do? What will I say? And then when you're there with somebody at the bedside, it's like, wow, like this was, or even, and I'm not sure when it happened because I will say years ago when I was like a teenager into my early 20s, I was very, um, I can't say anti-death, but I didn't want to be in funeral homes. I didn't want to be in cemeteries, like that all part of it. Like I remember when my grandparents died, I didn't want to have anything to do going with to the cemetery. And then a friend of mine's dad died when I was in my mid 20s, and I went to the wake, and then we went to the cemetery, and I was staying way in the back because I didn't want to be anywhere near that graveside. And just before the celebrants started to speak, I saw her husband like coming through the crowd, and I'm like, what's going on? And he came and he said to me, Mary needs you. So I went.
Aw.
And that was great because then I'm like, oh, okay, I've experienced this, I've done it, so now I can do it. It kind of like sensitizing, So since then, and then, like I've always been comfortable around people with any kind of disability or that don't fit in a box. I've always been more comfortable or very comfortable with that type of people. And so I've been comfortable talking to people that are dying, or like that's always sort of been, well, they're dying and I'm just going to talk to them like I would talk to anybody else. Like I would talk to somebody who's pregnant about what it's like to be pregnant and give birth. So why wouldn't I talk to somebody like, and it's never been an uncomfortable thing for me. So yeah, like it's just it's interesting.
I had a friend like this is probably like five, no, maybe 7 years ago now, who was dying. And before all this is kind of the seed that got planted into me becoming a death doula. And I had a friend who was dying of stomach cancer. He was 40 years old at the time. And I went to him at palliative care. He was like 87 pounds. Normally he's like hockey player kind of size guy, right? And just started asking him random questions about what it's like to die. And he was in palliative care, and he's like, Maleah, I didn't know I was dying till I talked to you. And that was like a holy shit
Wow.
moment for me. It took me a while to process what had actually happened. And he had his own freak out moment because it actually was sitting in. There's a way longer story, and I've shared it previously, and I'll probably share it 100,000 times more in different pinpoints, because it was that turning point. But that was what really, like, here's somebody sitting in palliative care who nobody's talking about them dying, and it's so clear he was dying. Like, there was no, yeah. So that was a massive turning point for me on like, why is nobody talking about this? And then, lots of other experiences where people have just not really been, they just don't want to talk about it, right?
Yeah. And that's why you and I need to get out there and educate people and say, like, it's okay. Like, it's it's part of life. And everyone is going to die. And like, I just think the poor people that don't get to talk about it because people are uncomfortable around talking about it. And so they die not being able to maybe express things that they wanted to express because they didn't want to make people uncomfortable. But if we could make people comfortable so that you're comfortable talking to someone who's dying, and if you're dying, you're comfortable talking to your friends and family about it. Like, yeah, like I've taught a friend of ours who like was a kid. He grew up with my kids and called me Auntie Mar. And when he died of colorectal cancer, and like when I would go to visit him, like like you said, Malia, we would just talk about. Some days we wouldn't talk about dying, and other days we would, and he would just tell me how he was feeling. But I was okay to say, "Wow, Cap, like you're not looking good today. What's up?" And then he'd say, "Well, I've got this and this and this," and yeah, just like I would say to someone who's pregnant, "Oh, wow, like you're looking like really tired." Well, like I'm, like doing this and this, and so yeah, I think it's just to get people having that comfort level. And I think not being comfortable with death is definitely a new thing.
Yeah.
It's not, it's in the last, like, I don't know, 50, 75 years. Because before then, like, because I can remember my dad saying that sometimes he would go to bed at night and he would wake up in the morning and there would be a body laid out on the table because someone had died in the community. And my grandfather would make caskets often and stuff, and people would just come to the home and visit the family, and because someone's died, like, so you just continue to give that support. And it's not like, ooh, like I don't want to be around a dead body. It's like, well, this person has died and they've left their body is here, and we're going to, now our job as a community is to support this family and bring them food and do that kind of thing.
Yeah, 1908, the Rockefeller Institution took over the medical industry, and that's when the funeral homes really started to come in and start monopolizing on how um, the Western death industry kicks, like,
Hmm.
really started kicking in, and then
Yeah. And
yeah,
during the wars was when they started embalming
yeah.
because they had to embalm to get the guys back home. But I mean, before that, you didn't do embalming and all that kind of stuff either, right? Yeah, yeah. Hopefully, we can go back to what it used to be like.
I would love to just be buried raw in the ground, but of course in Canada that's illegal right now. Or else I'd like to be put on a raft filled with candles, lit on fire, and pushed out or down the
Mm,
river, but that's illegal in Canada too right now.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm curious to see now that we're becoming like a even more multicultural, because like the Western viewpoint of death is, super in the closet versus the rest of the world.
Hmm.
If Canada will start opening up and changing their laws, obviously they're letting the green burials happen. But that even still, like there's still all these rules to green burial, right? That's how my mother-in-law was buried, which was still super beautiful, but it
Hmm.
was still like had to have a wicker casket, had to be, this and that,
Yeah.
still within the funeral, the graveyard. Um, I don't want to be buried in a graveyard. Like,
No,
um,
me
I just
neither.
somebody else making money off of my death that way. And my father-in-law was so pissed about how much the funeral homes actually like charged him, even double charged him, all this jazz for all kinds of stuff. And so by the end, he wanted nothing. And it was like, nope, the man wants to go in his sweatpants and the most basic cremation. But my husband built a really beautiful urn for him, and
Mm,
it was therapy for him in that grieving process, right? So now he's
yeah.
actually building urns too for people around here.
Mm,
So yeah, it's kind of cool.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
what kind of support do you think people need most when they're grieving?
You know what? It's very, very simple. They need a listening. Somebody to listen. Give them space. Let them feel comfortable to cry, to get angry, to be, like really pissed off at the person that died, and just to let them express all those feelings without judgment. So it's really, and that's another thing, Maleah. People are afraid to be around people that are grieving, but it's just expressing emotions,
Yeah.
and you just need to listen and let them express those emotions. And also, I say to people, I equate it to when you give birth. Often, everybody that comes to visit you, you tell them the labor story, all the good stuff and the bad stuff, and how long you were in labor, and you go through all that kind of stuff. And and then the next person comes in the room, you want to tell them the story again because that's an experience you had that you want to share. Well, when people are grieving, they might want to tell how their dad died, like every day to somebody. They just need to like go through that experience, and that's cathartic for them to go through the experience. If they were there, go through the experience. If they weren't there, like what it was like to get that phone call, or what all those, and they so they just need to. And you know what, if you've got a friend and they tell you the story like 10 or 12 times, just listen, and don't say, oh yeah, you told me that before. Just listen, and I think that's, it's so simple, it's ridiculous.
Yet people make it
Yeah.
so complicated.
Yeah.
Why do we go to work to complicate so many things, hey?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
tell
just so
people,
simple.
I just tell people, I'm in grief right now. And it's very shocking to them. Like, I get a little bit of amusement from it because sometimes I like to just be that way for my own personal self, not for
Hmm.
other people. And they're like, oh, okay. So I've even told people, like, because all of our death anniversaries of a bunch of parents are September, October. So I just tell people, oh, I'm in grief in September and October, so don't expect much. And they're like, oh, okay, okay. But it's nice because actually last year I did that and it just lightened my workload and just how I was supposed to show up or not show up for people. And they didn't
Hmm.
have these extra expectations. And so
Yeah.
this year I pre-planned it. So I was like, listen, you know, I'll be in grief these 2 months. And a few of my friends have just been like, oh, okay, that's weird. Or, where we work, I just told them, I was like, I'll be in grief these 2 months. So I'll do these jobs, but not these jobs. Oh,
Yeah.
it's okay. But we just had a death over the weekend, Brad's uncle, and we were away
Oh.
camping. And he died kind of feral, which happens quite a bit. But I wouldn't expect anything different of him at all, um, in that category. And it's just really neat to sort of see how, like, his birthday died just after his birthday. But last year I forgot his birthday, and he was really mad at me. Would talk to me for like a week, right? Because he had COPD, and his phone calls were his biggest thing, and I just didn't mean to. Like last year was a really rough year for us, right? And, so this year I sent him his birthday card early, but it showed up right before the 17th versus the 27th. I was like, I just didn't want to forget. And we talked and talked and talked right up until his birthday. And then he wouldn't answer the phone on his birthday for me. And I was like, he's mad at me. Why is he mad at me? I've been calling like every second day. I just got his birthday card in. Like, what did I do? Well, he was now probably kicking into a bit more of the active dying phase.
Right.
He had talked to his brother that day, my husband's uncle, and so we like, did you talk to him? And he's like, yeah, I did. We're like, okay, but then after we had to get the wellness check on him, and the cops went the one time, but he answered the door but wouldn't answer the door, and so then a couple days later, no response, which he phones like to the T a certain list of people on like super protective, right? And then so the next to go check on him, he had died. But it was like, and yeah, it's interesting. People in their choice of how they're choosing even their own inner way.
And I think that's really something that I like. The golden rule is great, but I think in a dying situation, the platinum rule is better, and do unto others as they would have done unto them. And so you really have to be cognizant of, like, some people, maybe I'm a person who wants to have, in fact, I want to have lots of people around me when I'm actively dying and in that process. But I can't assume that everybody wants that. And there's a lot of people that just want to be alone. Like a friend of mine's dad had several heart attacks, and he was not in good shape. And he went to his cottage because he would have a heart attack. Paramedics would come, he'd go to the hospital, he'd be back home again. And he went to his cottage, and he died at his cottage. And I think, like, that's what his daughter said. I think he thought, you know what? The only way I'm going to be able to die the way I want to die is to get away from the hospital, the paramedics, and my family that keep calling the paramedics when I have a heart attack. Like, I think he was tired of having heart attacks, and like, I just need to go in the next one. So he went, and so we can't assume. And even like touching people, like, some people want to be touched when they're dying, some people don't want to be touched. So, like, make sure you ask, what do you want? And if they can't communicate, then touch them and look at what their facial expression is. And you can tell, oh, yeah, I won't touch you. So even if they can't communicate verbally, they can communicate. And just, like you said, obviously your husband's uncle didn't want to be around people.
I don't know if I want people around me either. Like, maybe my husband and my kids, depending like when the timing would be. But as somebody who does have a little bit of a Buddhist practice here, I don't really want other people to mess up my practice. And so it was interesting when we were listening this weekend, when my husband and my brother, I just was walking by, and it was just this sort of conversation right here. And I catch a little tiny piece as I'm going to go do whatever with the kids or whatever we were doing. And it was about like, I can't believe he died alone, and it was like, well, actually, a lot of people are okay with that. Like, I personally would be okay with it too, because there's something that tells me, and that I'm open to my mind changing. So this is not like a end all be all concrete, but that our death is probably one of the greatest rituals of our lives. Your death and your birth, just like what you were saying before. And there's just something in my brain that, at this point anyway, so like I say, I can change my mind, but it's that if you can get your own personal ritual or ceremony correct, that might take you off the cyclic cycle of karma. Understanding that, or not having other people who are there projecting their needs on you, then kind of holds you in that cycle too. Like, I'm still working all of this out in my own brain, but Yeah, because sometimes a lot of families aren't getting along, or this and that,
Yeah,
or they think mom or
yeah,
dad want this, or so and so needs that, or that's,
yeah,
it really, I'm, I, yeah, not yet have I seen too many people where the death has actually been literally for the person who is dying. And it should be probably for everybody, or however it goes. That's not a judgment. That's just like myself witnessing moments, and
mhm,
where it's like, well, this is this person's ritual in this way. I think maybe, yeah. Anyways, that part's irrelevant. But so yeah, I've got
yeah,
like practice that I want to actually have happen so that I can be released. When I pulled a card on Brad's uncle in my studio the other day, he ended up getting one of the best cards in the deck for the death, and it had the rainbows for the rainbow light body, which I thought was really like beautiful. And this is how like I work through my grief, right? And I just thought, I was like, oh wow, because here's a man we might not have thought maybe wouldn't have reached that, or but because you can't judge, because you don't know how somebody's gonna do that, right? And so I just kind of thought of his like feral way, and then people are like, oh, he died alone, this X, Y, and Z, but it's like he got the most, like, I guess we could say, potent or highest elevation of a card for a Passover kind of deal, or a death, right? And I just thought, isn't
mhm,
that interesting? Because that would not have been what people might have pegged his spiritual growth to have been, due to all of our own judgment. So I just thought that was a really beautiful way for him and me to have that communication of his exit.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, and that's why, like, I'm a huge, I guess you could say, pusher of advanced care planning, because yeah, like you need to let people know, because people could assume, because you could be a very gregarious person in life, but then when you're thinking about dying, you don't want a lot, or you could be a very um, introvert, but then at the end you say no, like there's certain people I really would like to have there. So it's really important to let people know, and that's why if you assume that you're never going to die, which I don't understand why, but a lot of people do. They don't want to talk about death because they're not actually going to die.
Yeah.
So, but if you don't, then like maybe you're going to have, not that it's not going to be a good death necessarily, but it could have been better if you had have had what you wanted at the end. And I just think it's easier for the family. And you were talking about, people, and it brought to mind that a lot of people will keep pushing the meds and do everything you can because they're not ready for mom
Yeah.
to die or dad to die or But if you're honoring that person, and in your heart, and they have told you, you know what, I want nature to take its course. And I've said to my boys, like, I love you. I know you love me. So don't keep me alive an extra couple of days just so that you can say what you need to say, because we've said it, and or you can say it anytime. Like, you don't need to wait till that person is dying to say all those things, and keeping them like, no, saying to the doctors, no, keep her doing this and keep this and keep that, because I'm not ready. And we have to honor the person by realizing, what, maybe they're ready. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's very, but at the same time, it's easy for me to say, but when you're in that situation, and especially if it's an unexpected death, then like, not that old people are supposed to die, but my mom was older when she died, and I was sitting at her bedside saying to her, Mom, it's okay. Like, go and see dad. Like, like, just go and see dad. But if she had been 40 and I was 10, I probably wouldn't be saying to her, "My mom, it's okay, just go." I would have been saying, "Do anything you can. I still need my mom with me." So yeah.
Yeah. I
And
tell
that's the big thing. We can't judge how people. You can't judge how people deal with people that are dying or how they're grieving, because
yeah.
everybody does it their own way, and for them, it's the right way.
Yeah. I tell my family too, when it's my time to die, release me to the infinite realm of possibilities, because the worst thing you can do is hold me captive to the medical system, for me anyways, right? um,
Yeah.
Stephen Jenkinson, I don't know if you know him. He's like an author, storyteller. He wrote the book Die Wise.
Okay.
Super potent. um, Really hard book, because but he talks about like fighting the executioner, and doesn't matter how much you fight the executioner is going to win, the executioner meaning death, right? And
Mhm.
that, what are you buying more time for? And I have asked somebody that question, how long, well, more like this. I was like, well, how long are you going to fight the executioner for? And they just kind of looked at me and was like, well, I don't really want to fight it anymore. And I was like, so what are you buying time for? Like, and then that person ended up kicking into active dying just after that as well. So once again, it was
Mhm.
almost like, I don't want to say like the permission piece to allow somebody, but it kind of is that permission piece.
Mhm.
That, like, there's
Yeah.
no, like, what are you fighting this for? And once again, in that particular situation, it was the family that, let's just one more thing. You never know, one more thing. It's like,
Mhm.
well, and that one more thing is actually what really like pushed that person into active dying, which they were
Yeah.
going to go there anyways, right? But it's
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah, but I
Yeah.
like
It is.
that.
It's interesting, but everybody, and there's no right or wrong way to
Yeah.
deal with someone who's dying. There's no right or wrong way to grieve, and there's no right or wrong way to die. But I'm I would like to see that people are dying the way that they want to die, and that the families are obviously sad, and because that person isn't going to be around anymore, but at the same time, like, just allowing them to have that death that they want to have.
Yeah. I've recognized that grief actually shows you how much love you've got. Because
That's what grief is.
because we often, I guess, I don't know if this is exactly how I want to say it, but I just, but take advantage of our everyday life, right? Or those little things of telling somebody that you love them, or that how are you, or not being so judgmental to whatever experience they're going through. And then when grief happens, you recognize how much love, or how much not love, whatever, it could go either way, that you had or didn't have. So, and I don't think you can have one without the other, because I've recognized within my own self that when my grief was there, my love was actually more powerful. Um,
Mhm.
I was also
Yeah.
choosing to recognize it that way, right? But
Yeah. And I mean, that's what grief is, right? It's a sign. It's another sign of love.
yeah,
Like, you don't grieve if you haven't loved. Um, yeah. So I think that's yeah, and I think that's why it's so important that people grieve, and still are grieving 10 years later. Something will come up, and that's okay, because just like in a birth, like little things that that come up, you're like, oh, like when you hear about another person in labor, you're like, oh yeah, I remember. Or it's like, oh yeah, wow, like, oh, I remember, like when I saw my grandchildren, it took me right back to holding my boys. Well, my boys were in their 30s when I had my grandchildren. So just like something could happen that would remind me of my dad in 30 years, and it would make me start like grieve him, that's okay. Something's come up, and I'm grieving him. So yeah, like, I think that yeah. And when you were talking about telling people that you're grieving, I was talking to a group of people, and we were saying, like, we back in the day, when someone was grieving, they wore black for a year, right? So that everyone knew that they were grieving, and not necessarily that we should go back to that. But there was something to that ritual of grieving that let people know. And like we were saying, like maybe there should be something like an armband or something that you wear, or something. Somebody said, like, like when you've got a student driver or like new driver or baby in car, like on your bumper, like grieving person, because as we know, when you're grieving, sometimes your concentration isn't on par, and you've got all these physical symptoms going on. That it's not a bad idea for people to recognize, and not to recognize they're grieving a week after their loved one has died, but realizing they're grieving a year after, or 2 years after, or they look like they're having a bad day, let's ask them it. And then having, like, if I'm looking at you in 3 years and I'm thinking, Maleah seems a bit off today, and when I say, Maleah, instead of saying, oh no, I'm just tired or I'm fine, say, you know what, I'm really grieved my dad right now, or I'm really grieved my mom, like be able to express. That's why I seem to be off today, because a song on the radio this morning made me grieve my dad, and that's why I don't look like myself today.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is kind of an interesting question, but if you could ask one question to somebody who has died, what would it be?
You know what I would love to know? If people are aware of us on Earth. Like because I feel like our emotions are a brain thing. So I don't think that once we die, we have that ability to feel the emotions. But I think if they can see us, and we're doing things like how do they feel? Like, say, they're looking at a father's looking at his son, just for instance, going to war, and going through all this, and or they're going through something that like a divorce, and dad had always liked that daughter-in-law, and I didn't realize they weren't happy, and do they think that way, and think, I feel so bad, or I would just like to know, what not what their emotions are, but what they experience if they're aware that we are here on Earth still.
Yeah, neat.
I don't know.
And do you think that ritual, faith, and spirituality play a role in how you understand death?
That's a tricky one, because even if you're religious or spiritual, we still don't know what happens after we die, right? So, but I do think that because a lot of, and I'm sure most people know this, but a lot of the hard part when people are dying, what gives them, people think, it's hard to die because you're in pain or whatever. But the hardest part is, number one, often it's what's going to happen to the people that I'm leaving behind. And they're, thinking about that. But also it's the unknown, because most people, whether you have anxiety or no anxiety or whatever, most people are uncomfortable with the unknown. If you go to the doctor and he does a test, even if you get bad news from the test, at least what's going on. Now I know, okay, I've got, this. Now I know what I'm dealing with. So when you're dying, we don't know what happens, and nobody can let us tell us what happens. So yeah, I think but I think that if you have a belief that you're going to heaven, or you're going to be reincarnated, or you're going to, be able to come back and visit through your spiritual, some kind of that, I think that does bring you comfort, whatever your belief is. I do think that it brings you comfort.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, and one last question here before we end up. So, if you could go back and tell your younger self, sorry, let me reread this again. What would you tell your younger self if you had the chance to go back in time regarding the topic of death?
I think I would tell myself to just embrace, and also to live your life as if you were dying tomorrow. So that, and treat people, because think about, like, whenever you leave someone, think about that. If they were to die, or if you were to die, is that the conversation I would want them to remember, or the conversation that I want to remember when they die? And so just having that in mind, like, I'm a big thing, write your eulogy yourself and then live up to it. So whatever you want people to say about you, you got to live that, or they're not going to be able to say that about you. So if you don't want them to think, oh, like, she was so unapproachable, then don't be unapproachable. Like, if you want people to say, oh, like, I loved it, this and that, you got to live that. So I think I would tell my younger self to write your eulogy and then live every day by that. I'm just reading a book right now. It's called Hero on a Mission, and that's what he's talking about. Writing, like, doing things in your life that you can put into your eulogy, so and then live it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So let me just bring this part back up on the screen so people know how to find you. So you can find Mar at comfortindeathdoula.ca/WordPress. And she does grief support, advanced care planning, dying and death planning, legacy work, and death cafes. Do you have a death cafe coming up anywhere at all, Mar?
You know what? I don't have. I've got a grief group coming up actually this evening, but I don't have a death cafe planned. I'm going to, very excitedly, going to Newfoundland for a month.
Nice.
We won't be. We'll be there 2.5 weeks, but we're going to be away for a month. So once I get home, then I'm going to be planning some death cafes in the future. And what I'm planning to is what I call them is death chats. So those can be done either over the phone, virtually, or just over the phone or in person. So if you just want to chat about anything to do with dying, death, or grief, we can do that.
Just reach out to Mar.
Yeah, just
in a month. She's going on holidays.
That's right.
How wonderful. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mar. Don't exit out of this. I'm just going to end up stopping the recording. And once again, you can find me over here at findingrealm.com on X, YouTube, and Rumble, sometimes Facebook, but not often. And you can find me at a death cafe on August 5th from 1:30 to 3, Qualicum Beach. So hold on. I've got to practice moving all these slides. So thank you very much, Mar. And I'd love to have you back on the show again.
I'd love to come back, and thanks so much for having me. Like I said, it's always fun to talk about dying, death, and grief.
Right? Okay. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.